Unique people leading unique lives shape and inform Iowa City. This community is enhanced by these women and men who live in our midst, working, teaching, creating. Welcome to a series of conversations with people who have stories to tell. Join my guests and me, Ellen Buchanan, in a series of interviews called One of a Kind. Dr. James Clifton, a well-known gastroenterologist at the University of Iowa, is my guest on One of a Kind. Born in Fayetteville, North Carolina in September of 1923, Dr. Clifton eventually moved with his family to Nashville. His father was an internal revenue agent, which required moving every couple of years. In fact, he went to 12 different schools by the time he finished 12th grade. He went to Vanderbilt undergraduate and medical school, and then at Iowa, he was in an internship program, and that was in 1947. He claims that he didn't even know where Iowa was located. It was someplace like out in Wyoming or Montana. In 1953, he returned to the University of Iowa to set up the gastroenterology program. In 1955, he left for a fellowship at Boston and returned to Iowa and headed the GI division for 16 years. He was chosen in 1970 to be the chairman of the Department of Internal Medicine. After serving 7 years, he stepped down to conceive and develop, with the help of John Colleton, the Center for Digestive Diseases. It was the first of its kind in the country, and the center now bears his name. After a brief retirement, Dr. Clifton was asked to become the interim dean of the School of Medicine, retiring a second time in 1993. He is the recipient of many awards and honors, and I can only mention a few. The Roy J. Carver Professor of Medicine, Who's Who in America, the Distinguished Alumnus Award from Vanderbilt University in 1984, the Distinguished Alumnus Achievement Award from Iowa's College of Medicine in 2000, and in 2002, from the College of Medicine, he was awarded the Distinguished Mentor Award. Dr. Clifton became a leader in the National Association, serving as president of the National Gastroenterology Association, president of the American College of Physicians, and the chairman of the American Board of Internal Medicine. He and his wife, Kathy, raised 3 daughters in Iowa City, Susie, Katie, and Carrie. Dr. Clifton gives great credit to his wife for her support and help raising the family. They have 4 grandchildren. Welcome to One of a Kind.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Let's start your story at the beginning. We talked a bit about you moving a lot. What was that like for you? And tell me a bit about your first family, your father and your mom.
Well, my father and mother were both from North Carolina in what's called the Sand Hill section, around Fayetteville, Maxton, and Rayford, smaller towns. And they were friends from early childhood. And then as Dad got into his later teen years, he joined the National Guard. And his unit was called to the Mexican border during the Pancho Villa War, and he was down there when we entered World War I. And then Dad was called into active service in the Army, in the 30th Division. And they went over to France in late 1916, early 1917. And he was there till several months after the war was over. Fortunately, he was an officer. He was a first lieutenant, and he was a battalion adjutant. Mm-hmm. And he did not have to be in the trenches all the time. But he saw so many of his childhood friends drowned in the trenches from alcohol intoxication because they weren't used to it in the rural parts of North Carolina. And he vowed that if he survived that war, he would spend his life fighting alcohol, and that's why he went into the Internal Revenue Service. And so as soon as he got back from the war, he and my mother got married. And I was born a year and a half after they married. In retrospect, I think my mother had toxemia of pregnancy, and she was quite ill, and at that time the doctors felt you shouldn't be pregnant again. So she was advised never to have another child. That's how I became the only child.
Did he talk much about his experiences in World War I?
Very little. My dad was a very outgoing fellow and a good storyteller, but he rarely talked about himself. And so I really heard very little about his war experiences or even his experiences as an Internal Revenue agent. And he had many fabulous experiences, but he didn't like to talk about himself.
When did you think you wanted to be a physician? How old were you?
I can't tell you because I don't remember wanting to be anything else. I don't remember wanting to be a fireman or a pilot. I just remember wanting to be a doctor. And I think a lot of that related to a man who was our family doctor, Dr. Tommy Frist in Nashville. He was an internist who trained here at Iowa. Major reason I came here. And his lot and our lot adjoined, and we were close. They were close friends of my family. I started making house calls with him when I was a freshman in high school, and so he was really the stimulus, you know, for me to go into medicine.
And his son, the famous, he's in the Senate now.
Yeah, he has two famous sons actually. Tommy was an entrepreneur, in addition to being a wonderful physician, cardiologist. He founded the Hospital Corporation of America and was its first president. And then his son, Tommy Jr., who was a surgeon, came into the business, and he was even more entrepreneurial. And Tommy Jr. is the one who really drove it to a billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar corporation. And the younger son, Bill Frist, was also a surgeon, a cardiac surgeon, and he is the one who ran for Senate and beat the incumbent Democrat, and now is the majority leader in the Senate. I knew him since the day he was born.
That's a great story. So Dr. Frist Sr. was instrumental in having you look at Iowa, even though you didn't know where
That's
it
right.
was located. To come here as an intern.
That's
Is that
correct.
right?
That's correct.
So you came here as this young intern, unmarried, which was most of the interns at that time were unmarried.
Absolutely. We were paid $35 a month.
My goodness. And, you got free housing,
Free
didn't
housing,
you? And
yes.
tell the viewers where you lived. I think it's
I
interesting.
lived in the tower of the old hospital on the 5th floor on the north side. There was a big poplar tree that came up to my floor, but I lived under that window for 2 years until Kathy and I got married.
So let's talk a little bit about, it was an important time besides getting your internship behind you, but you had a blind date with Catherine Rathie, a very lovely, lovely young woman.
That's right.
What was this, is there a story to how it all happened?
Not really. A colleague of mine, a fellow intern, was dating a girl in Courier Hall. And I asked him to get me a date, have her get me a date with somebody. And so she got me a date with somebody named Catherine Rathie. And there was a barracks behind Courier Hall then, and there was girls in there. And Jackie Finn here in Iowa City was the house mother of that group. And Kathy was standing on the doorstep when we got there. My folks had given me a maroon Oldsmobile for graduation.
Very fancy.
So that was to be reckoned with in 1947, 48. And so, we started dating, and I thought she was really something. I had heard of her father. Her father was an internist in Waverly, Iowa, and he founded a clinic there. He was widely regarded as probably the best internist in practice in the state of Iowa. And I had heard of him from the faculty here before I met her. In fact, he was on the faculty here at one time in the early 30s, and her younger brother was born here. But it was in the depths of the Depression, and they just weren't paying enough, and he had to go into practice.
So you passed the father's inspection since you too were going to be in internal medicine.
That was a big plus. Yeah.
I think so.
Big plus, yeah.
The Oldsmobile was for Kathy.
That's right, for Kathy. I had the use of that car for about 6 months after we met, and then she took it over.
Oh, she took it over.
Yes.
Now, is it true that Dr. Lou January, whom many people remember with great admiration and affection, got Kathy her first job here in Iowa City?
That's exactly right. She graduated in '49, and we got married 2 or 3 weeks after her graduation. And I was making $70 a month then, but we couldn't live on $70 a month. And she had graduated with a major in home economics. And so she needed a job to make some money. And Lou January, who was a good friend of her father's, and of course I knew him quite well, and he was very pleased I had married her. He gave her a job taking electrocardiograms. And so she bounced around the hospital taking electrocardiograms, and the patients thought that we were a cute couple. Yeah.
And you lived on the corner of Bloomington and North Dubuque
North
Street?
Dubuque Street, and the house has a turret in the front of it. And we had an apartment on the second floor, and we had the turret.
Is it still standing?
Yes,
it's
it's
still
still
standing.
there.
That's over 4 years ago, I think.
That's right, still there. It was old then.
Well, built to last.
Yes.
So was this at the time then, you were in Iowa City finishing up your internship, that the Korean War broke out? And did you get sick at this time?
That's right. I was
How did this affect you?
Well, it changed my whole life, actually. I was a third-year resident from 50 to 51. And I was called to Des Moines to take my physical in December, I think it was. And I passed that, and I got my papers to report to Fort Sam Houston on July the 5th of 1951. And in April of that year, I developed a little cough, which was unusual for me. And I went down to the x-ray department, which was on the first floor then, and got a chest x-ray. And I came back in the afternoon and picked up the chest x-ray and threw it up on the view box. And my eye just shot to a little shadow in the left upper lobe, about the size of your end of your thumb. And I almost fainted because I knew what that was. And so I was at Oakdale for 8 months. And Dr. Spear took care of me, a wonderful doctor. And it interrupted, though, my service in the Army. And then I was going back to Nashville to go and practice with Tommy Frisk. That was my aim. And we went back down to Vanderbilt. And I had a job they fixed up for me at the VA where I didn't have to work so hard. And after 2 years, the doctors there were still leery of my going in and work with this fellow who worked so terribly hard, night and day. And I was a little discouraged about that. And then Bill Bean heard about that. And I'd been studying gastroenterology down there. So he invited me to come out here and start this program.
For perhaps people who are new to Iowa City, just briefly describe William Bean, because he was quite well known and rather famous.
He was very famous. Bill Bean was a remarkable man. He was a Virginian. He came here from the University of Cincinnati. And he was unusual. He was very informal, and he wore sandals without socks, and he smoked a corncob pipe, and he sat in his office with his bare feet propped up on the desk. And he was really quite a guy. He was probably the smartest man I've ever known. He had a brilliant mind, an absolute encyclopedic knowledge of medicine. But he was not interested in administration, couldn't care less about it. And as a result, he farmed out the administration department to a group of us like myself and Jack Eckstein, Paul Seabaum, Henry Hamilton. And as young faculty members, we got a lot of experience doing administration. It was a fascinating time, though, because he was such a wonderful guy. He took a liking to me for reasons which I don't know, because we're totally different. When
You
he
didn't smoke a corncob pipe, for one.
That's right. When he first came, I was on one of the wards near his office, and his secretary came down and said he wanted to see me. Well, I thought that was really something, and I could think maybe he was going to give me a jump promotion or something. So I went in his office, and he was surrounded by boxes of books, and he wanted me to help him unpack his books. Well, it was a fascinating 3 or 4 hours, because as he handed me each book to put on the shelf, he would tell me something about it. He was absolutely brilliant. So he and I became friends, and he promoted my career, and he made me vice chairman of the department in 1967, when he went on sabbatical to University of Virginia. And I ran the department completely, because when he came back, he said he wanted to step down in 1970, when he was 60 years old, and asked me to just keep running the department, recruiting, salaries, promotions, and everything. And the department voted for me to do that. And so I did that for 3 years. I ran the department for 3 years before I was made the head. And he promoted my career, strong influence on me.
So let's talk about all your years at Iowa in the gastroenterology division. You've had a lot of accomplishments. Is there one or two, are there one or two that mean the most to you, of looking back at your long career here?
Well, I think maybe, Ellen, the beginning and the end. The beginning of having Bean's full backing to build up an academic department of gastroenterology was a wonderful opportunity. And we built one of the finest divisions in the country. At one time there, we had more NIH research funding than any GI department in the country. I know that because I was on the National Institutes of Health, a National Advisory Council, which controlled all the money that went into gastroenterology. So I knew whatever division the country had. And we had more research money than anyone. So that was a great stimulus and thrill for me. And then lastly, that time I spent as interim dean in 91, 93.
Hunter Rawlings.
Hunter Rawlings taught me into doing that. And he gave me his full backing to go full bore to do a lot of things that need to be done. And I had complete support of the department heads and the faculty. And we got a lot done. Paul Seaborn was still in the dean's office then. He'd retired, but he was still there. And I talked him into staying and helping, and he was just a wonderful supporter of mine. And as was Jack Eckstein, who'd been the dean. Jack had an office near mine, not next to it. And he was very helpful to me. So we got a lot done.
When you were hiring, you were in charge of hiring a lot of young men and women, and what quality, besides the expertise in their field, what do you look for in a new recruit? Is there one or two that just are very important to you as you interviewed these?
I always thought that their background was important, that they had proven themselves at good institutions, and that they had good recommendations, and that they were known as good team players, that they were not egotists that want to go off on their own all the time. And I also felt it was important for the recruit and his or her wife, or spouse, I should say, to be happy in Iowa City. And I always explained to them that Iowa City is a different place. That if, I said, for example, if your wife is a person who likes to go window shopping a couple of times a week, she's not going to like it here. There's just not that many windows to shop.
That's right.
And but if she's interested in all the cultural things that we have to offer, or the athletic things, or whatever, then you'll like it here. But I tried to get that up front. And we didn't have many disappointments. We didn't have a lot of people who bailed out because they weren't happy in this small community.
Sometimes this is a hard question to answer, but what do you view as one of your greatest strengths? Is it that you're a good judge of character, or what?
Oh, you know, I think that I think my greatest strength is liking people.
Mm-hmm.
I like people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a people-oriented person,
Mm-hmm.
and I tend to, in talking to people in the office, you know, who come to ask advice, I tend to stretch back in the chair and put my feet up on the desk and maybe tell an off-color story or something to get things going. Sit there relaxed and talk. I like to talk.
And you're
as you know.
Well, you're a storyteller.
Yeah.
Must be in the blood of Tennessee men and women.
Well,
that
it was
you're
in my
storytellers.
father's blood. Yeah,
Yes.
it sure was. Kathy says I get my gift of gab from my father.
From your father.
Yeah.
Looking back, I always ask my guests who or what had a major influence on you. Events shaped
Yeah.
you, people shaped you.
I think, and perhaps you agree, that most of us are certainly influenced by our families. And my family, they didn't have a lot of money, but they were solid citizens, and they taught me, you know, they gave me a moral compass to live by, value of hard work, get an education, because neither one of them had higher education. And they really pushed me to do that. They were very generous with what they had. And then the individuals like Tommy Frist and Bill Bean, and then Franz Engelfinger, who I trained under in Boston,
Yeah, talk about him.
were very important to me. And just to carry on for a minute with the family, when I came under the influence of Kathy's mother and father, who were just wonderful people, and they taught me a lot about the importance of paying attention to what was going on in the political sphere, how important it was to give to charity and all as much as you could, and they also emphasized education a great deal. So it was, I think it was a combination of those, but the influence that has been with me forever since marriage is Kathy. In her own quiet, unobtrusive way, she is the guide that has kept me straight and has kept me moving along. And I really give her all the credit. Jean Eckstein, Jack's wife, a good friend of ours, she refers to Kathy as that sainted Kathy Clifton, having to live with me all these years.
Well, you weren't home much, were you?
I wasn't home much, no.
I mean, when I look at
Yeah.
all
No,
the
I wasn't.
presidencies of this, you traveled a lot, and you must have been at the hospital a lot.
At one time, the station manager in Cedar Rapids for United Airlines told me I was their #1 passenger out of Cedar Rapids. I was moving a lot, and I was not a good father because I wasn't there, and Kathy was the one who really raised the kids, and she kept us together.
Let's talk about your girls. You had 3 girls in Iowa City, but the oldest had a tragic accident.
Yeah, Susie.
Susie.
Yeah.
She was just home from, you said, college?
Yeah, she'd finished her first semester at Colorado College. She was an excellent student. She was really a top student. And she finished her first semester, and she'd gone to Cedar Rapids with a couple of friends to see other kids off on a 7:30 flight in the morning in the pouring down rain. And they came back through Ely to get away from the highway traffic. And unfortunately, there was a little light car, and they hit a rough spot in the road and skidded. And Susie and another girl were killed. So it was just a terrible situation for us. And again, it was Kathy's strength that really got us through that. I was a basket case. Yeah. I had just become head of the department and had just become president of the American Gastroenterologist Association at the same time. So it was
A really
tough
time.
Tough time.
You have 2 girls who are married, and
Yeah.
tell me a bit about where they're living.
Yeah, Katie is married, and she lives in Casper, Wyoming. And she has 2 daughters, Jessie and Nicole. Both of them came back to the Midwest to go to college. Nicole up at Luther and Jesse at Lake Forest College.
Great.
They're both still in Iowa.
Wonderful.
Jesse is here as a research assistant in the Department of Psychiatry, and Nicole is working up in Decorah as the 911 operator, and she's a part-time jailer.
Wow.
And
Good for
so
her.
she's paying back her educational debts. And then Carrie lives in Colorado Springs. She is a school teacher, and her husband is a school teacher at a private school there. He's head of their art department. They have 2 kids. Paige is 9, and Quinn, the only boy in the family since me, Quinn is 6.
Okay.
And they're all coming home for Thanksgiving.
How wonderful.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it.
Now, you moved out at one time, your 3 girls were all interested in horses.
That's right.
And you, I don't know how you did it with all your obligations at the hospital and traveling, but you were out there with a tractor, and
right.
you had a farm.
We had a little farm. We bought 2 little farms up the road from us when they were selling for $450 an acre, and I learned to plant corn and soybeans, and I had a little cow-calf operation. I learned to do artificial insemination. Well, I was crazy.
You were crazy.
I was crazy. Yeah.
I think it was probably relaxing,
Yeah,
don't you, for you?
I was crazy,
You were-
and I had a heart attack out in the middle of all that.
You did?
I did.
Oh, I
did.
missed that.
You missed that.
Oh my goodness. So when was that, and what happened?
Well, it was in 1977. I was over tightening up the bolts on my planter, and I had a heart attack.
And somebody found you?
Oh no, I got back.
Oh,
home.
you got back
I got
and
back home.
got
I
to the
came
hospital?
I got to the hospital. Yeah.
And did you have a bypass?
I did in '83.
83.
Yeah. I had a wonderful cardiologist, good friend of mine. He's very conservative, and I'd been to China in '81 as a guest of the Chinese Medical Association, and went to the major cities and all. And they asked me to come back in '83 and go down to some of the small communities along the Mekong River and so forth. And I didn't want to go down there without knowing what my heart was like.
Sure.
So I talked him into doing a cath on me. And Don Doty, the cardiac surgeon, looked at me and he says, we can fix you up. So I said, let's do it.
And
So I got it done in January of '83, and we were in China in April. Worked out just fine.
you're feeling great.
Great.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, you're
Lucky.
retired the second time, right?
Yep.
All right. What is engaging you in retirement?
Oh, well, I'm too busy.
You,
I'm way too busy.
How
There's
wonderful.
too much to do in this town.
that's true.
The major problem in Iowa City is there's too much to do, and you know all about it because the town is so small. Drives you crazy trying to pick and choose. Yeah. And so we go to the senior college activities, and we go to the Hampshire things, and we go to the art things, and Kathy's a docent at the Art Museum, and we're there a lot. And then we travel quite a bit. And my hobby is photography, has been for many years. And now I do digital video photography, and then I edit those in the computer. And I've also put in my still pictures in the computer, and I make little movies, which I put on DVDs. And
Movies of?
these trips.
The
These
trips.
yeah.
Okay.
And then we send these to the kids. Yeah, so they can see where we went. It's a lot of fun.
But you've given up farming.
Oh yeah, we sold. 3 years ago, we decided that time we moved to town. So we sold the farmland and the house and the land around that, and bought a condominium out on Rochester and moved to town.
Do you read for pleasure?
Yes, I do.
Love what kind of?
I like biography. I read quite a bit of biography. I like that.
Since you were a part of the medical community, and nationally, internationally, and locally, what do you see as the biggest change in 50 years since you started as an intern at University Hospitals on the 5th floor in the tower? What is the biggest change in medicine?
I
the
think,
most profound?
Yeah, I think, there are two. One has to do with the technological aspects of medicine. I remember quite well when I was a junior medical student at Vanderbilt, penicillin first came into civilian life. The Army had it all. And I saw firsthand the true miracle that was wrought in lobar pneumonia patients, for example, with penicillin. We gave 10,000 units every 4 hours, collected the patient's urine, sent it to the lab, extracted the penicillin back out, purified it by ultrafiltration, and gave it back. There was so little of it. And of course, from that on, all the drugs that have come out and all the technology. And the second major thing has been the change in the way healthcare is delivered and who pays for it. And now, as you know, we're in kind of a mess. We have our country has a health non-system. We don't have a health system. It's a non-system. And it's a patchwork of this and that with 43 million Americans with no health care. When I first came here, the state of Iowa, one of the things that impressed me was their health care system for the poor.
Oh, yes.
You know, wherever you were in this state, if you were poor and needed health care, they would send an ambulance from here, pick you up.
Was it green? I remember.
They were brownish green.
Brownish green ambulances.
They would bring you here. We would take care of them. They would send you home, take you to your door with 10 days worth of medicine. Only state in the union that had that. Was just remarkable. And of course, that indigent care program still goes on. But I think that the way the health care is so splintered and messed up now is a real tragedy. I hope something can be done about it.
Me too. Good point. My last question, and maybe you've already answered part of it, what has been the best thing about living in Iowa City for you and your family?
Well, the people. Really, the thing that impressed me about Iowa when I came here was really the people. Very friendly, nice people. The faculty was friendly and nice, and they learned my first name right off, which the faculty at Vanderbilt never learned, and it was really quite a revelation to me, and I continue to to like the people.
Well, on that wonderful positive note, I'll end this talk, and thank you so much for being my guest.
Thank you very much for having me.
My guest on One of a Kind has been the well-loved and well-respected Dr. James Clifton. At the University of Iowa, he has left his mark as a leader and mentor to hundreds and hundreds of medical students, residents, and faculty. One of the highlights in his story is the Dr. James A. Clifton Center for Digestive Diseases. He conceived and developed this center, the first in the country. Ask a colleague or a friend to describe Dr. Clifton, and their response is, he is a man of grace, wit, integrity, kindness, and imbued with a great sense of fair play. Dr. Clifton is one of a kind.